The maid fell to her knees begging, "Please don't hurt my daughter." Then the billionaire walked in. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse's service quarters, each drop a percussion note in Maya's symphony of despair. At 27, she'd learned that life rarely offered second chances, but as she clutched her 9-month-old daughter Lily closer to her chest, she prayed for just one miracle. "You have until the end of the day," Mrs. Whitmore, the head housekeeper, had said that morning, her voice sharp as cut glass. "Mr. Ashford doesn't tolerate disruptions in his household. That baby crying at all hours, it's unacceptable." Maya had nodded, unable to form words around the lump in her throat. She'd known the rules when she took this position 3 months ago. Live-in staff were expected to be invisible, efficient, and above all, silent. A colicky baby fit none of those criteria. The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of Chicago's most exclusive residential tower. Maya had been hired through an agency, desperate and qualified for nothing but hard work and determination. The pay was exceptional, enough to cover Lily's medical bills from a difficult birth and maybe, just maybe, start saving for a better future. But now that future was crumbling like sand through her fingers. Lily whimpered against her shoulder, and Maya bounced gently, humming a lullaby her own mother had sung before the cancer took her 2 years ago. Before everything fell apart. Before Lily's father, Maya's ex-boyfriend, had disappeared the moment he'd learned about the pregnancy. Before Maya had found herself truly alone in this massive city, just her and this tiny, perfect person who depended entirely on her. The afternoon light was fading when Maya heard raised voices from the hallway. She pressed herself against the door of her small room, heart hammering. She recognized Mrs. Whitmore's clipped tones, but there was another voice, younger, male, aggressive. "I know she's got money stashed somewhere," the man was saying. "People don't just work in places like this for chump change. She owes me." Maya's blood ran cold. Derek, Lily's father. She'd been so careful, never listing her workplace on any forms, never posting on social media. How had he found her? "Sir, you need to leave immediately or I'll call security," Mrs. Whitmore said. "Not until I see Maya. She's got my kid, and she's got my money." Maya's hands trembled as she quickly locked her door, then moved to the window. 3 stories up, no fire escape. Her room was at the end of a long hallway with only one exit. She was trapped. The pounding started moments later. "Maya, I know you're in there. Open this door." Lily began to cry, frightened by the noise and her mother's rapid heartbeat. Maya sank to the floor, her back against the bed, holding her daughter with one arm while fumbling for her phone with the other. Her fingers shook so badly, she could barely unlock the screen. "Please, Derek, just go away," she called out, hating the tremor in her voice. "You think you can just take off with my kid? I got rights. You gave up those rights when you told me to get rid of her. When you called her a mistake." The pounding intensified. "Open this damn door, or I'll break it down. You owe me, Maya. All those months I fed you, put a roof over your head. That's worth something." Maya wanted to scream that she'd worked 2 jobs while pregnant, that she'd paid her own way while he'd gambled away every dollar he earned. But fear had locked her voice in her throat. The door shuddered on its hinges. He was actually trying to break it down. Maya dropped to her knees, still clutching Lily, and pressed herself into the corner between the bed and the wall. Tears streamed down her face as she bent over her daughter, making herself into a shield. "Please," she whispered, not sure if she was praying or simply begging the universe. "Please don't hurt my daughter." The door splintered. Derek's boot had cracked the frame. One more kick, maybe 2, and he'd be inside. Lily was screaming now, sensing her mother's terror. Maya pressed her lips to her daughter's soft hair, breathing in that sweet baby smell, memorizing it in case. The pounding suddenly stopped. In the ringing silence that followed, Maya heard new voices. Deep, authoritative, cutting through Derek's bluster like a knife through silk. Security is on their way up. You have about 30 seconds to leave voluntarily, or you'll leave in handcuffs. This is none of your business, man. That's my kid in there. What I see is a man trying to break down a door in my building, terrorizing my employee. That makes it exactly my business. My building. My employee. Maya's mind raced. This had to be him, Alexander Ashford, the billionaire tech mogul who owned this penthouse, this building, and half of Chicago's skyline. She'd never actually seen him. He traveled constantly, and when he was in residence, staff were instructed to stay out of sight. Look, I don't want any trouble. Derek's voice had shifted, turned wheedling. I just want to talk to my girl. See my baby. The woman I hear crying in fear on the other side of the store? She doesn't sound like she wants to talk to you. Maya heard scuffling, Derek's protests, then the elevator chime. Mrs. Whitmore's voice, apologizing profusely. More footsteps moving away. Then silence. Maya didn't move. Couldn't move. She stayed frozen in her corner, Lily pressed against her heart, both of them trembling. A soft knock at what remained of her door. Miss Garcia? The voice was gentler now, nothing like the steel she'd heard moments before. He's gone. You're safe. But your door is compromised, and I'd like to make sure you and your daughter are all right. May I come in? Maya looked down at Lily, whose cries had subsided to hiccuping whimpers. She looked at her pathetic little room with its broken door, her meager possessions scattered about. She thought about Mrs. Whitmore's ultimatum that morning. She had nothing left to lose. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, you can come in. The door opened slowly, carefully, and Maya looked up to see Alexander Ashford for the first time. He was younger than she'd expected, 32. She remembered from the staff briefing, tall and dark-haired, dressed in an expensive charcoal suit with his tie loosened. But it was his eyes that struck her, gray as storm clouds, currently filled with an expression she couldn't quite read. Concern, maybe, or calculation. He took in the scene, the broken door, the frightened woman on the floor, the crying baby, and something shifted in his expression. Let's get you somewhere safer, he said, extending his hand. And despite everything, despite her fear and exhaustion and desperation, Maya took it. Alexander Ashford had built his fortune by reading people, by calculating risks and returns in milliseconds, by never letting emotion cloud his judgment. But as he helped Maya Garcia to her feet, feeling her hand tremble in his, all his carefully constructed logic circuits seemed to short out. She was beautiful in the way that exhausted mothers often are, raw, vulnerable, stripped of pretense. Her dark hair had escaped its bun, falling around a face marked by tears and determination in equal measure. But it was the way she held her baby that struck him. Protective, fierce, like she'd go through hell itself to keep that child safe. He knew something about that kind of love, even if only as a distant memory. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, not taking his eyes off Maya, please have the blue guest suite prepared immediately. And call building security. I want to know how that man got past the front desk. Mr. Ashford, I apologize, but the housekeeper began. The blue suite. Now. His tone brooked no argument. Maya was shaking her head. No, I can't. I'll pack my things. I know I'm fired. I'll be out tonight. Fired. Alexander frowned. Why would you be fired? The baby, the crying, the disruption, Mrs. Whitmore said this morning. He turned to his housekeeper, who had the grace to look uncomfortable. Mrs. Whitmore, did you tell Miss Garcia she was being terminated? Not in so many words, sir. But I implied that the situation wasn't sustainable. The situation where one of my employees is a single mother doing her best to work and care for her child? His voice was ice. That situation? Mr. Ashford, your standing orders have always been that the household must run quietly, that you shouldn't be disturbed. And has Miss Garcia's baby disturbed me? He knew he was being unfair. He'd been in Tokyo for the past month. But something about this situation, about the terror he'd seen in Maya's eyes when he'd found that man trying to break down her door, had ignited something protective in him that he didn't fully understand. "Well, no, sir, but—" "Then I see no problem. Miss Garcia, please, the Blue Suite has a separate nursery attached. You and Lily will be comfortable there while we figure this out." Maya stared at him like he'd just spoken in a foreign language. "I don't understand. That man, Derek, you called him? He knows where you work. This room isn't secure anymore." Alexander gestured at the splintered door. "Until we can ensure your safety, I'd prefer you and your daughter stay somewhere he can't access. But the guest suite, that's for your guests, not staff. Right now, you're not staff. You're a person in need of help. Let me provide it." He watched her process this, saw the moment pride warred with practicality. Lily chose that moment to let out a wail, and Maya's attention immediately shifted to soothing her daughter. That decision made, Alexander thought. Whatever pride Maya Garcia possessed, it came second to her child's needs. "Just for tonight," Maya finally said. "Until I can find somewhere else to go." "Of course," Alexander agreed, though he had no intention of letting it be just one night. Not until he understood the full situation and ensured these two were safe. The Blue Guest Suite occupied the opposite end of the penthouse from his private quarters, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Maya stopped in the doorway, Lily still against her shoulder, and simply stared. "This is too much," she whispered. "The nursery's through there." Alexander pointed to a connecting door. "It was designed for visiting executives with children, so it should have everything you need. If it doesn't, make a list, and I'll have it delivered." Maya walked into the room like she was navigating a minefield, afraid to touch anything. Alexander found himself oddly irritated by her fear, though he knew it was irrational. What did he expect? He was a billionaire, and she was a maid who'd been threatened with termination that morning. "Miss Garcia, Maya, can I ask you something?" She turned, wariness in her dark eyes. "Okay. Why did you take a live-in position with an infant? It couldn't have been your only option." For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she sank into one of the plush armchairs, adjusting Lily in her arms, and the words seemed to pour out. "Lily was born premature. 6 weeks early. She spent 3 weeks in the NICU, and even after we came home, the bills just kept coming. I was working at a diner, but it wasn't enough. I couldn't afford daycare and rent and medical bills. My mom died 2 years ago, so I had no family help. When the agency told me about this position, room and board plus salary, it seemed like the answer." "And Lily's father?" Maya's expression hardened. "Derek wanted me to take care of it when I told him I was pregnant. Said a baby would ruin his life. I haven't heard from him in over a year, until today." "What does he want?" "Money, probably. He's always got some scheme, always owes someone. I imagine he heard through mutual friends that I was working in a nice building and figured I had cash to spare." She laughed bitterly. "If he knew the truth, that every penny I make goes to paying off hospital bills, he'd realize this was a wasted trip." Alexander moved to the window, processing this information. He'd dealt with countless business adversaries, hostile takeovers, corporate espionage. But this kind of human desperation, this grinding poverty and fear, existed in a world he'd left behind so long ago, he'd almost forgotten it. Almost, but not quite. "How did you find me?" Maya asked. "I mean, how did you know?" "I was coming home from the airport when Mrs. Whitmore called building security. I heard the commotion when I stepped off my private elevator." He didn't mention the cold fury that had gripped him when he'd heard a man threatening to break down a door, heard Maya's terrified pleas. Didn't mention how he'd moved without thinking, driven by an instinct he didn't recognize. "Thank you," Maya said softly, "for intervening. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't." "You don't need to thank me." Alexander turned from the window. "But I do need to understand the full situation if I'm going to help. I can't accept, Maya stumbled over the words, and he realized she was trying to refuse help she desperately needed. "Let me rephrase," he said, gentler now. "I'd like to help, if you'll allow it." Lily had fallen asleep against Maya's chest, tiny fist curled against her mother's collar. Maya looked down at her daughter, and Alexander saw the exact moment she made her decision. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." The next morning, Alexander woke to a sound he'd never heard in his penthouse before: a baby laughing. He found himself in the kitchen at 6 a.m., drawn by the bright, bubbling giggles emanating from the breakfast nook. Maya was there, Lily propped in a makeshift seat made of cushions, making silly faces at her daughter while simultaneously trying to eat toast one-handed. "Good morning," Alexander said from the doorway, and watched Maya nearly jump out of her skin. "Mr. Ashford, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to wake you. I thought I was being quiet." She was already gathering Lily up, preparing to flee. "Stop," he said, more sharply than intended. Then softer. "Please. You didn't wake me. I'm always up early. And please call me Alexander." "I couldn't possibly. You're staying in my guest suite, not my staff quarters. The normal rules don't apply." He moved to the coffee maker, desperately needing caffeine. "Have you eaten?" "Just toast." "I didn't want to presume." "Maya." He turned to face her. "You're going to give yourself an ulcer with all this anxiety. You're a guest. Act like one." "What would you normally feed Lily for breakfast?" "Oatmeal, usually. Mashed banana."
She paused.
"But I can make do with whatever." Alexander was already pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. "Oatmeal we have. Bananas too." He hesitated. "I should probably confess I have no idea how to make baby food." Despite everything, Maya smiled. Just a small quirk of her lips, but it transformed her face. "I can show you, if you really want to know." They fell into an oddly comfortable rhythm, Maya directing from her seat with Lily on her lap, Alexander following instructions at the stove. It was absurd, he thought. Alexander Ashford, who had CEOs and senators on speed dial, learning to mash bananas and cook oatmeal for a 9-month-old. "So, what does a billionaire typically have for breakfast?" Maya asked as he stirred the pot. "Whatever my private chef prepares. Usually something with egg whites and vegetables I can't pronounce." "Sounds delicious," Maya said dryly, and he found himself laughing. "It's terrible. I'd kill for a stack of pancakes and bacon, but apparently that's not optimal for performance." He tested the oatmeal's consistency. "How's this?" "Perfect. Now, just let it cool while you mash the banana." Lily watched him with wide, curious eyes as he worked, occasionally reaching out her tiny hands toward him. Alexander found himself fascinated by her, the way her expressions shifted, how she could go from giggles to serious contemplation in seconds. "She likes you," Maya observed. "She's usually shy around strangers. Maybe she recognizes a fellow early riser." Alexander set the mashed banana aside. "I've been meaning to ask, what exactly were your duties here?" "Mrs. Whitmore's reports are always somewhat opaque." Maya shifted uncomfortably. "General housekeeping, mostly. I cleaned the common areas, did laundry, whatever was needed. I tried to work during Lily's nap times or after she went to bed, but she's been teething, so her schedule has been unpredictable." "And Mrs. Whitmore threatened to fire you because of that." "She didn't exactly threaten. She just made it clear that the situation wasn't sustainable." Maya's voice was careful, diplomatic. "I understand. This is your home. You have a right to peace and quiet." Alexander thought about his vast, silent penthouse, the way it echoed with emptiness when he was here alone. Peace and quiet, he'd always believed, were what he wanted after the chaos of his work life. But listening to Lily's babbling, watching Maya's patient ministrations as she fed her daughter, he wondered if perhaps silence was just another word for loneliness. "My mother died when I was 10, he heard himself say. Maya's head snapped up, surprise clear in her expression. Alexander never talked about his past. It wasn't relevant to business, and business was all that mattered. Except now, apparently, it did matter. We didn't have much, he continued, testing the oatmeal's temperature on his wrist the way Maya had shown him. She worked 3 jobs, trying to keep us fed. I remember her coming home exhausted, falling asleep in her chair, waking up a few hours later to go to the next job. He handed Maya the bowl. She used to apologize for the noise when I was trying to do homework. For being in the way. For existing, basically. Maya was quiet for a moment, spooning oatmeal into Lily's eager mouth. What happened to her? Heart gave out. The doctor said it was like she'd lived 3 lifetimes in 40 years. He poured himself coffee, black, bitter. I went into foster care after that. Bounced around until I aged out at 18. I'm sorry, Maya said softly. That must have been incredibly hard. It made me who I am. The stock response, the one he always gave on the rare occasions his past came up in interviews. But looking at Maya and Lily, he wondered if that was entirely true. Had it made him who he was, or had it just taught him to wall off the parts of himself that remembered what it felt like to be hungry, scared, alone? Is that why you helped us? Maya asked. Because you remember what it's like? Alexander considered lying, giving some noble answer about civic duty or basic human decency. But something about Maya's direct gaze demanded honesty. I helped because that man was trying to hurt you, and I had the power to stop him. The reasons why I had that power, that's more complicated. Everything about you seems complicated, Maya said, then immediately looked horrified. I'm sorry, that was inappropriate. I shouldn't have. It's accurate, Alexander interrupted, amused. I've built my entire life on being complicated. It keeps people from getting too close. Is that what you want? To keep people away? It was a question no one had ever asked him directly. His therapist had danced around it for years. Business associates wouldn't dare. But this 27-year-old single mother, sitting in his breakfast nook feeding her daughter, had just cut right to the heart of it. I don't know, he admitted. I've never really thought about it. Lily chose that moment to grab the spoon from Maya's hand and fling it across the kitchen, squealing with delight. Maya started to apologize, but Alexander was already laughing, moving to retrieve it. She's got good aim, he observed. Future softball player, maybe. Future troublemaker, more like. But Maya was smiling, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. They spent the next hour like that, talking, laughing, cleaning up the small chaos that seemed to naturally follow a baby around. Alexander found himself telling stories he'd never shared, about his early days coding in coffee shops, about the first company he'd built and sold, about the loneliness of success. Maya shared too, in smaller doses. Her mother's battle with cancer. The community college classes she'd been taking before Lily arrived. Dreams of becoming a teacher someday, of giving her daughter the stable life she'd never quite had. What was your mother's name? Alexander asked as they loaded the dishwasher together. Rosa. Rosa Elena Garcia. Maya's voice was thick with emotion. She would have loved Lily so much. I'm sure she would have. Alexander hesitated, then added, My mother's name was Catherine, a Katie to her friends. She would have told you that you're doing an amazing job, that Lily is lucky to have you. Maya looked up at him, tears shining in her eyes. Thank you for that. The moment stretched between them, something unspoken and fragile. Then Lily let out an enormous yawn, and they both laughed, the tension breaking. Someone needs a nap, Maya observed. And someone needs to get to work, Alexander said, glancing at his watch. He had a board meeting at 9, acquisition proposals to review, 1,000 things demanding his attention. But as he headed to his study, he found his mind wandering back to the kitchen, to the sound of Lily's laughter and Maya's smile. Found himself wondering what it would be like to have breakfast like that every morning, surrounded by warmth and life instead of efficiency and silence. It was a dangerous thought. Alexander Ashford had built his empire on focus, on keeping his personal and professional lives completely separate. He didn't do relationships, didn't do messy emotions, didn't let anyone get close enough to distract him from his goals. But as he heard Lily's babbling through the penthouse speakers, he couldn't help wondering if maybe, just maybe, he'd been wrong about what actually mattered. 3 days passed, and Maya remained in the blue suite. Not because Alexander insisted, though he did make it clear she was welcome to stay, but because Derek had escalated his harassment. He'd shown up at the building twice more, been turned away by security both times, but the threat remained. Alexander had his legal team draw up a restraining order. He'd also hired a private investigator to look into Derek's activities, which turned out to be even more concerning than expected. The man had gambling debts in 5 figures, a history of petty theft, and associations with some unsavory characters. He's desperate, Marcus Chun, Alexander's head of security, reported during their Friday afternoon briefing. Desperate men do stupid things. Increase security on all residential floors, Alexander ordered. And I want someone monitoring Maya's movements whenever she leaves the penthouse. Marcus raised an eyebrow. We don't typically provide personal security for household staff. We do now. Alexander's tone invited no argument. After Marcus left, Alexander sat in his study, staring at the financial reports on his screen without really seeing them. He'd spent the past 3 days in a state he barely recognized, distracted. Meetings ran long because he kept checking his watch, wondering if Maya and Lily had eaten lunch. Conference calls were interrupted by the sound of Lily's laughter echoing through the penthouse, making him smile at inappropriate moments. His CFO had asked if he was feeling well. His brother had called, wondering why Alexander hadn't returned 3 emails about their quarterly review. The truth was, Alexander Ashford was doing something he'd never done in his 15 years of building his empire. He was prioritizing something other than work. That evening, he found Maya in the living room, surrounded by papers and looking frustrated. Lily was on a blanket nearby, contentedly chewing on a teething ring. "Everything okay?" he asked. Maya jumped, clearly not having heard him approach. "Yes, sorry, these are Lily's medical bills. I've been trying to work out a payment plan, but the numbers don't make sense." Alexander moved closer, glancing at the papers. "May I?" Maya hesitated, then nodded. "It's embarrassing, honestly. I feel like I should understand this, but the insurance explanations and the billing codes, it's like reading a foreign language." Alexander picked up the stack of documents, his mind automatically organizing and categorizing. Within minutes, he'd spotted several billing errors, duplicate charges, and services that should have been covered by Maya's insurance but weren't. "This is wrong," he said flatly. "This charge here, they billed you for private room when Lily was in the NICU, but premature infants in critical care can't have private rooms. It's not medically possible. And this, they're charging you for a procedure performed on a date when Lily was already discharged." Maya's eyes widened. "Are you sure? I spent 2 years working with hospital billing systems for a healthcare startup I acquired. These are classic overbilling errors." He pulled out his phone. "I'm going to have my assistant contact the hospital billing department. We'll get this sorted out." "Alexander, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." He met her gaze. "Let me help, Maya. Please." She studied him for a long moment, and he wondered what she saw. The billionaire who was used to getting his way? The boss who could fire her on a whim? Or something else entirely? "Why are you doing all this?" she asked finally. "The suite, the security, now this. I'm just your maid. You barely know me." "You're not just anything," Alexander said, more intensely than he intended. "And maybe I want to know you better." The admission hung in the air between them. Lily gurgled happily, oblivious to the charged moment. "I don't understand you," Maya said softly. "Men like you don't notice women like me. We're invisible." "You've never been invisible to me." The words came out before Alexander could think better of them. "From the moment I saw you protecting your daughter, willing to face down anything for her, you've been all I can see." Maya's breath hitched. Alexander, I know this is complicated. I know I'm your employer, and there's a power imbalance, and 1,000 reasons why this is a terrible idea. He moved closer, drawn by something he couldn't name. But I also know that I haven't been able to focus on anything except you and Lily for 3 days. That I wake up hoping to hear Lily's laugh. That I find excuses to work from home instead of going to the office. That's just proximity, Maya said, but her voice wavered. And maybe guilt or some savior complex. It's not. Alexander knelt beside her chair, bringing himself to eye level. I've spent my entire adult life building walls, keeping people at a distance. In 3 days, you and Lily have somehow gotten past every single one. I don't know what to do with that. Maya's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I'm terrified, she whispered, of hoping for something I can't have. Of letting Lily get attached to someone who might leave. Of being another complication in your complicated life. What if you're not a complication? What if you're the solution? To what? To everything that's been missing. Alexander reached out, gently touching her hand. I've achieved everything I set out to accomplish. Built an empire, changed industries, made more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes.
But I've been lonely, Maya.
So lonely, I didn't even realize it until I heard Lily laugh and saw you smile. A tear slipped down Maya's cheek. This is crazy. We barely know each other. Then let's get to know each other. No pressure, no expectations. Just let me be part of your lives. However that looks. Lily chose that moment to crawl over to Alexander, pulling herself up on his knee with a triumphant sound. She beamed up at him, showing off her 2 tiny teeth, and Alexander felt something in his chest crack open. Hi there, little one, he murmured, and Lily patted his face with one chubby hand. She's never done that with anyone but me, Maya said, wonder in her voice. She won't even go to my friend Sarah. Alexander carefully picked Lily up, and she settled against his chest like she belonged there. Maybe she knows something we don't. Maya laughed through her tears. Maybe she does. They stayed like that for a long time, the 3 of them in the quiet penthouse, watching the sun set over Lake Michigan. Alexander held Lily while Maya leaned against his shoulder, and for the first time in years, he felt something other than the driving need to achieve, to build, to win. He felt like he was home. Later that evening, after Lily was asleep in the nursery and Maya had retired to her room, Alexander stood at his window, looking out over the city he'd conquered. His phone buzzed with urgent messages, deals closing, crises brewing, opportunities knocking. He ignored them all. Instead, he thought about a young mother who'd fled an abusive relationship, who worked herself to exhaustion for her daughter's future, who'd faced down her worst nightmare with nothing but courage and fierce maternal love. He thought about a baby girl with 2 teeth and a laugh like bells, who'd somehow decided he was trustworthy enough to hold. And he thought about the walls he'd built so carefully and how maybe it was time to start tearing them down. 2 weeks later, Alexander stood in his living room surrounded by chaos. Lily had discovered she could pull herself to standing, which meant every piece of furniture was now a potential climbing apparatus. Maya was chasing her in circles, laughing and exasperated in equal measure. Lily Marie Garcia, you're going to give me a heart attack. Maya scooped up her daughter just as she reached for an expensive sculpture. Sorry, Alexander. I swear I had her contained. Stop apologizing, Alexander said, grinning. And that sculpture is hideous anyway. I only bought it because some art consultant said I should. It's worth $60,000, Maya said faintly.
Exactly.
Terrible waste of money. If Lily wants to knock it over, she's welcome to do so. Maya stared at him. Who are you, and what have you done with the billionaire? He's on vacation, Alexander replied. Indefinitely. It was true. Over the past 2 weeks, something fundamental had shifted in Alexander's priorities. He'd started delegating more, working from home 3 days a week, actually leaving the office at reasonable hours. His executives were confused. His board was concerned. His therapist was delighted. "You seem different," Dr. Morrison had observed during their last session. "More present. Less driven by ghosts." Alexander hadn't told her about Maya and Lily. Hadn't known how to explain that two people he barely knew had somehow become the center of his universe. But he was beginning to understand it himself. "I have news," he said now, watching Maya settle Lily on the floor with a pile of blocks. "About Derek." Maya's expression immediately shuddered. "What about him?" "The restraining order was approved. He's not allowed within 500 feet of you or Lily." Alexander pulled out his phone, showing her the official documentation. "But there's more. My investigator discovered he'd been running a credit card fraud scheme. He's facing federal charges. It's likely he'll serve time." Maya sank into a chair, Lily in her lap. "Oh, God." "You're safe," Alexander said gently. "Both of you. He can't hurt you anymore." "I should feel relieved," Maya whispered. "And I do, but also he's Lily's father. However terrible he is, she has a right to know him, doesn't she?" Alexander knelt beside her chair, the position becoming familiar. "Lily has a right to be safe and loved. That's all. If Derek ever gets his life together, if he ever becomes someone worthy of knowing her, that's a bridge you can cross later. But right now, your only job is protecting her. And you've done that beautifully." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "Accept help. Trust someone. Let myself believe this is real." She gestured between them. "Whatever this is." Alexander took a breath. He'd rehearsed this conversation a dozen times, but now that the moment was here, all his carefully prepared words vanished. "I'm in love with you," he said simply. "I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but I'm in love with you and Lily both. You've become my family, and I don't want to imagine my life without you in it." Maya's breath caught. "Alexander." "Let me finish," he said. "I know I'm not easy. I work too much. I'm used to controlling everything. I have more money than sense sometimes. But I also know that every morning I wake up hoping to hear Lily's laugh. That I've started measuring my success, not in deals closed, but in how many smiles I can put on your face. That I want to be there for Lily's first steps, her first words, her first day of school. I want to be her father, Maya. If you'll let me." Tears were streaming down Maya's face now. "You can't just say things like that." "Why not?" "It's true. Because I'm falling in love with you too, and it terrifies me." Maya's voice broke. "What if you wake up one day and realize this was just some phase? That you don't actually want a ready-made family? That Lily and I were just a distraction from your real life?" "This is my real life," Alexander said firmly. "Everything before you was just preparation. Building an empire, so I could protect what matters. And what matters is right here, in this room." Lily, oblivious to the emotional moment, crawled over to Alexander and pulled herself up on his knee. "Duh," she said proudly. It was her new favorite sound, and Alexander's heart melted every time. "See," he said to Maya. "Lily agrees with me." Maya laughed through her tears. "She says that to everyone. The mailman is duh. The doorman is duh. That lamp is duh." "I choose to believe I'm special," Alexander said, lifting Lily into his arms. She immediately grabbed his nose, giggling. "You are," Maya said softly. "God help me, you really are." Alexander stood, still holding Lily, and extended his hand to Maya. "Come with me. I want to show you something." He led them through the penthouse to a room Maya had never seen, his private study, the inner sanctum he'd never allowed anyone to enter. The walls were lined with books, the desk scattered with papers, but what dominated the room was a massive window overlooking the city. "This is where I've spent most of my adult life," Alexander said. "Making decisions, building companies, proving to the world that I was worth something." He turned to face Maya. But I realized something recently. I was trying to prove it to myself most of all. Trying to fill a hole left by a mother who loved me but couldn't stay, by a childhood spent feeling powerless and small. He set Lily down in the play area he'd had installed that morning, soft mats, age-appropriate toys, everything she might need. And Lily showed me that I don't need to prove anything anymore. I just need to be present.
To be there.
To love and be loved in return. Maya was looking around the study, taking in the changes. You had this baby-proofed. I had the whole penthouse baby-proofed, Alexander admitted. Corner guards, cabinet locks, outlet covers. My contractor thought I'd lost my mind. But I wanted you both to be comfortable here. To feel like this is your home, not just a place you're staying. Alexander. Maya didn't finish the thought, just moved into his arms, letting him hold her while Lily played at their feet. They stood like that for a long time, watching the sun set over Chicago, the city lights beginning to twinkle like stars. I need to tell you something, Maya finally said. About the medical bills. We fixed those, remember? The hospital agreed to adjust. Not just that. She pulled back to look at him. I've been too proud to ask for help my whole life. My mom was like that too. She'd rather work herself to death than accept charity. But watching you with Lily, seeing how much you genuinely care, I realized that accepting help isn't weakness. It's just love in action. It absolutely is, Alexander agreed. So, I'm saying yes, Maya continued, to whatever this is, to taking a chance on us, to letting you be part of our lives, really part of them. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. If you ever have doubts, if this ever becomes too much, please just tell me. Don't string us along because you feel obligated. Lily deserves better than that. I deserve better than that. Alexander cupped her face in his hands. You deserve everything, Maya. And I intend to spend as long as you'll let me proving that. But to be clear, I'm not going anywhere. I'm all in, completely and totally. You're stuck with me. Promise? She whispered. I promise. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, while Lily babbled happily in the background. When they broke apart, Maya was smiling through tears. So what now? Now. Alexander grinned. Now I teach Lily to say my name correctly. I refuse to share the designation with a lamp. Maya laughed, the sound filling the study with warmth. You're ridiculous. I'm in love, he corrected. There's a difference. 6 months later, Alexander stood in the same spot, but everything had changed. The study was now filled with family photos, Lily's first birthday party, Maya's graduation from her teaching program, the three of them at the zoo, the beach, 100 small moments that added up to a life. Maya was officially his girlfriend, though that word felt inadequate for what she meant to him. Lily called him Dada now, a distinction he wore more proudly than any business title. They'd moved into a larger penthouse together, still in his building, but one designed for a family, with a real nursery and a playroom and space for Maya's books and dreams. He'd cut his work hours in half, promoted trusted executives to handle day-to-day operations, and discovered that his companies ran just fine without his constant intervention. Better, even, because he made clear decisions when he wasn't exhausted. His therapist said he was thriving. His brother said he was unrecognizable. His board said he'd lost focus. Alexander didn't care what they said. He knew the truth. He hadn't lost focus. He'd finally found it. Dada. Lily toddled into the study, now walking confidently on chubby legs. Up. Alexander scooped her up, spinning her around until she shrieked with laughter. Maya appeared in the doorway, shaking her head at their antics. You're going to make her throw up, she warned. Worth it, Alexander declared, settling Lily on his hip. Guess what? I had my lawyers finalize the paperwork today. Maya's eyes widened. The adoption? The adoption, Alexander confirmed. If you're still okay with it, I'd like to formally adopt Lily. Make it official. He'd asked Maya months ago, but she'd wanted to wait, to be sure. Now, watching her face light up with joy, he knew the answer. Yes, Maya breathed. Yes, absolutely yes. Lily, sensing the importance of the moment, patted both their faces.
Mama. Dada.
That's right, baby girl, Alexander murmured. Your mama and your dada. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Alexander and Maya sat on the balcony, wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill. I've been thinking, Maya said, about the future. Oh. Alexander pulled her closer. I want more, she said. More of this. More family dinners and bedtime stories and chaos. More of you looking at Lily like she hung the moon. More of us. I want that too, Alexander said. All of it. Good. Maya turned to face him, eyes shining. Because I think we should make it permanent. Alexander's heart stopped. Are you? I'm not proposing, Maya said quickly. Not yet. That's your job. But I'm saying I'm ready. Whenever you are. Alexander laughed, pulling out the ring box he'd been carrying for the past month, waiting for the perfect moment. How about now? Maya's hands flew to her mouth. You had a ring? I've had a ring since the day I realized I couldn't imagine my life without you. He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant diamond. Maya Elena Garcia, will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband, Lily's father, and whatever else our future holds? Yes, Maya said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring on her finger, and they kissed under the stars, two people who'd found each other in the most unexpected way. Inside, through the baby monitor, they heard Lily stirring. Maya started to rise, but Alexander stopped her. Let me, he said. She's probably just dreaming. He found Lily standing in her crib, reaching for him. Dada, she said sleepily. I'm here, baby girl, Alexander murmured, lifting her into his arms. I'm always going to be here. Lily settled against his chest with a contented sigh, and Alexander stood there in the soft glow of the nightlight, holding his daughter, because that's what she was now, in every way that mattered, and feeling more successful than any business deal had ever made him feel. He thought about the man he'd been 6 months ago, driven, focused, alone, building an empire to fill a void he'd barely acknowledged. He thought about Maya, kneeling on the floor of a broken room, begging for her daughter's safety. He thought about how sometimes life's biggest moments don't announce themselves with fanfare. Sometimes they arrive in a moment of crisis, when you're forced to choose between comfort and courage, between staying safe and taking a chance. And he thought about how grateful he was that he'd walked through that door, that he'd seen beyond the maid to the extraordinary woman protecting her child, that he'd been brave enough to let them into his carefully constructed life. Thank you, he whispered to Lily, though she was already asleep. Thank you for teaching me what really matters. Outside, Maya was waiting on the balcony, his ring on her finger and his future in her smile. Alexander Ashford had built an empire. But with Maya and Lily, he'd finally built a home. And that, he thought as he carried his daughter back to bed, was the greatest success of all.